Rain slicked the asphalt of Interstate 95 in Northern Virginia, reflecting the neon of distant billboards in fractured streaks. Barrett C. Kingsley, newly appointed FBI Director, drove a rented Lincoln Navigator, its engine a soft hum against the quiet drizzle. The night was thick with fog, obscuring the lines on the highway. But Barrett's eyes scanned the road with the calm precision of 30 years in federal law enforcement. Clad in a charcoal suit, folded neatly on the passenger seat, he was exhausted from a long meeting in Richmond. His speedometer read 54 in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. Then the rearview mirror erupted in blue and red. He sighed, eased the Lincoln over, and killed the engine. Hands steady on the wheel, he waited as two figures approached. One remained by the patrol car, hand near his holster. The other, flashlight cutting through the rain, moved forward. "License and registration," a young officer barked, amber shooting glasses glinting. Barrett reached slowly, speaking calmly, explaining where his wallet and registration were. Vance, the younger officer, lied about smelling alcohol. Barrett denied drinking in over a decade. Still, Vance forced him out, hands behind his back, slamming him against the Lincoln. Sergeant Ronan, older and bulkier, joined, sneering at the rented SUV. Barrett complied with the handcuffs, observing their behavior, noting their arrogance, the pockmarks on Ronan's face, the stiff pride of Vance. As they rifled through his belongings, Barrett's wallet and credentials revealed his identity as FBI Director. Ronan opened the badge, glimpsed the holographic seal, and laughed, dismissing it as a fake. The officers ignored legal authority and drove him to the Oak Creek precinct, mocking him, parading him through the bullpen as if the highest-ranking lawman in the country was just another offender. He was booked as John Doe, subjected to strip search and humiliation, orange jumpsuit ill-fitting. In the cell, he observed the other inmates, a young man shaking from withdrawal and older men hardened by life. Barrett studied, meditated, noting every detail, cataloging the corruption, preparing a mental record for federal action. Hours passed. Shift changes brought a new guard, Harlan, to whom Barrett revealed the credentials and instructed to make a call without alerting Ronan or Vance. Barrett returned to the cell, calm, collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment. At dawn, court procedures began. Bailiffs, prosecutors, and the judge moved mechanically, unaware of the federal oversight that had already mobilized. Barrett's courtroom appearance challenged the entire Oak Creek structure. Tactical teams with FBI markings flooded the courthouse, arresting the corrupt officers and securing records. Barrett instructed the crowd of federal agents to meticulously gather evidence, dismantling the machinery of abuse. The press witnessed the culmination. Barrett explaining the systemic violations, the harm inflicted on innocent citizens, and the need for accountability. Months later, headlines told the story. The traffic stop that exposed a corrupt precinct, the arc of justice extending beyond humiliation to systemic reform. Barrett sat in the gallery, observing the sentencing, seeing Ronan and Caldwell face the consequences. Justice was served, and a pattern of abuse ended under federal oversight. Barrett Kingsley didn't just survive, he transformed personal indignity into a legal reckoning, a lesson on power, accountability, and moral courage. Barrett's return to Oak Creek was quiet, deliberate, a stark contrast to his initial arrest. A convoy of black Chevrolet Suburbans swept into the precinct parking lot, engines muted, tires crunching over gravel. Inside, the precinct was a hive of federal precision. Agents in navy jackets, emblazoned with yellow FBI letters, moved with surgical purpose, collecting files, imaging hard drives, and tagging evidence. Barrett walked calmly through the bullpen, observing officers frozen in fear, stripped of their authority, watching as the chaos of their misdeeds was laid bare. Officer Caldwell was absent. She was elsewhere explaining digital alterations of booking logs over the past year. Barrett's eyes found Harlan, isolated at a small desk, shoulder slumped, a man who had chosen integrity in a building full of wolves. Barrett approached him quietly, commending his courage. Harlan's eyes welled with tears at the recognition. Barrett handed him a Department of Justice card, detailing a direct line and an offer to join internal affairs, reinforcing the principle that loyalty to law outweighed loyalty to corrupt leadership. Barrett moved to the center of the bullpen, addressing the room with authority. Officers stiffened as he laid bare the consequences for those who had participated in corruption. Audits, text messages reviewed, accounts frozen. Yet he offered a choice to those who had acted honorably: assist in cleansing the precinct or step away with dignity. The message was clear, the fear palpable. Barrett then left for the press conference outside, choosing the precinct as a backdrop for transparency. Cameras flashed as he spoke, focusing attention not on his ordeal, but on the broader injustice endured by innocent citizens. Nurses, students, mechanics, the victims of the Oak Creek system were the center of his address. He emphasized that the Constitution shields the vulnerable, and corruption can no longer hide behind badges. The audience understood the law is a shield, not a weapon. Reporters pressed about his strip search and the mistreatment he endured. Barrett's voice remained calm, resonant, devoid of self-pity. He shifted the spotlight to systemic abuse, underlining that personal indignity was secondary to the protection of the citizenry. 6 months later in Richmond, the final court proceedings unfolded. Barrett, now a spectator, watched as Caldwell and Ronan faced sentencing. Their transformation from arrogance to despair was complete. Mustaches shaved, faces pale, confidence broken. Officer Vance had taken a plea early, serving as key testimony. The courtroom, filled with victims and journalists, held a palpable energy of justice being realized. Sentences were meted out: Caldwell to 30 years, Ronan to 25, as the law imposed the maximum for systematic corruption. Barrett observed quietly, the gaze he held on Ronan a silent acknowledgement of karmic resolution. The machinery of injustice had been dismantled, the consequences clear, the precedent set. Barrett Kingsley had transformed humiliation into a reckoning, turning the nightmarish arrest into a catalyst for justice, accountability, and systemic reform. The lesson endured: power untempered by accountability is vulnerable, and those who exploit trust will ultimately face the full weight of the law. Barrett leaned back in the back seat of the sedan as the convoy navigated away from Oak Creek, rain streaking the windows in rhythmic lines. The town had been a small, almost idyllic place on the map, yet beneath its quiet veneer thrived a network of corruption cultivated over decades. Barrett reflected on the meticulous orchestration of the operation: every traffic stop, every falsified DUI, every impoundment fee funneled illicit profits to a small circle of officials and business owners. The law, which should have been the guardian of citizens, had been weaponized for personal gain. He watched Harlan in the front seat, the young officer still tense, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled determination. Barrett spoke quietly, recounting lessons from the night before. What you saw was a system designed to crush the innocent and enrich the corrupt. Your choice to intervene matters. Harlan nodded, absorbing the gravity, understanding that loyalty to ethics came at a cost, but preserved dignity. Barrett's mind returned to the events on the highway. The arrogance of Vance and Ronan had nearly masked their criminality, but their overconfidence had left a trail. From the timing of the arrest to the confiscation of his credentials, Barrett had recorded everything mentally, each infraction catalogued for prosecution. He had played their assumptions against them, transforming a moment of vulnerability into a legal opportunity. The press conference loomed, but Barrett knew the impact extended far beyond media optics. The real victims, those caught in the impound, the falsified DUIs, the inflated fines, needed acknowledgement. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, under his direction, had not arrived to punish for spectacle, but to restore integrity. Harlan glanced at Barrett, breaking the silence. "Do you think they understand the consequences yet?" Barrett's gaze fixed on the horizon, where the sun began to cast thin light over rolling hills. "They will. The law will speak louder than words." As the convoy approached the courthouse in Richmond, Barrett considered the final steps: securing the defendants, presenting evidence, ensuring the federal oversight could not be obstructed. Inside, victims would see that justice, though delayed, was inevitable. Barrett's mind was a chessboard, every move precise, considering timing, optics, and legality. Each step meticulously aligned to dismantle a corrupt apparatus while protecting innocence. Harlan's hand relaxed slightly on the wheel, trusting in Barrett's experience. They pulled into the courthouse, the structure imposing, its steps leading to accountability. Barrett's eyes surveyed the scene. The courthouse represented authority, yet it had been complicit through inaction. Today, it would witness rectification. The press and public assembled, but Barrett remained calm, understanding that patience and meticulous execution were as critical as any confrontation. His reflection on the Oak Creek precinct revealed a systemic flaw. Small-scale corruption, left unchecked, flourished into large-scale injustice. Today marked the turning point. Barrett adjusted his tie, glanced at Harlan, and stepped out of the sedan. Each step toward the courthouse echoed his resolve. The night of humiliation had forged a path for justice, ensuring that the corrupt would be held accountable while the innocent would finally receive redress. The courtroom in Richmond was thick with tension as Barrett entered, flanked by federal agents. He remained in the shadows of the gallery, blending in with the spectators, a silent observer of the reckoning about to unfold. The defendants, Caldwell and Ronan, were ushered in, their demeanor a mix of defiance and apprehension. Barrett's mind catalogued the events that had led here. The illicit traffic stops, the falsified DUIs, the impounded cars, each a thread leading back to the deliberate corruption that had flourished unchecked. As the bailiff called the room to order, the gravity of the proceedings settled like a fog over everyone present. The victims sat rigidly, their expressions a mixture of hope and anticipation, understanding that today would finally address the injustices they had suffered. Barrett watched the prosecutor approach, case files in hand, the weight of the legal machinery behind her evident in her precise movements. As Caldwell was called to the stand, his face betrayed the realization that the veneer of authority could no longer shield him. Barrett noted the subtle shift, the fear that comes from understanding consequences are unavoidable. Ronan followed, his earlier arrogance replaced with visible tension, eyes scanning for any semblance of support or reprieve. Barrett's gaze held steady on both men, a silent reminder of accountability. The judge, stern and unwavering, began reading the charges, her voice resonating through the high ceilings. Racketeering, deprivation of civil rights, money laundering, conspiracy, each word a hammer striking the foundation of the Oak Creek corruption. Caldwell's flinch was slight but telling. Ronan's trembling hands could not conceal the gravity settling in. Barrett reflected on the months of investigation, the careful accumulation of evidence, and the meticulous orchestration of a federal response that left no room for obfuscation. The courtroom's air vibrated with anticipation as the verdicts were read. Caldwell received 30 years without parole, Ronan 25. The gavel's echo was final, signaling not only punishment but the restoration of justice for the victims. Barrett allowed a small, restrained exhale, his role as orchestrator complete. The systemic abuse had been dismantled, the corrupt structure collapsed under the weight of evidence and federal oversight. As the marshals led the defendants away, Barrett remained seated, observing the faces of those wronged. Relief, vindication, and the quiet comfort of accountability rippled through the room. Barrett Kingsley had transformed personal humiliation into a decisive act of justice, demonstrating that careful planning, ethical resolve, and courage could dismantle even the most entrenched corruption. As he rose to leave, he felt the weight of responsibility, tempered by the satisfaction of ensuring that law and morality had prevailed over arrogance and greed. After the courtroom proceedings, Barrett returned to his sedan, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the Richmond streets. He remained composed, a man who had turned the night of degradation into a strategic victory. Harlan, in the passenger seat, observed the calm precision with which Barrett reviewed notes on his tablet, cross-referencing witness statements and procedural logs. Barrett discussed next steps, detailing the oversight plans for neighboring counties where similar abuses had been reported. Each detail mattered, monitoring impound lots, reviewing traffic stop logs, interviewing local law enforcement, and ensuring public awareness of systemic reforms. The Lincoln Navigator from Oak Creek remained in the impound lot, untouched as a symbol of the corrupt network dismantled. Barrett's strategy was deliberate. Evidence had to be incontrovertible for federal courts and public scrutiny. The drive through the city was quiet, contemplative. Barrett reflected on the psychology of corruption, the arrogance that blinds individuals, the assumptions that their power shields them from accountability. He knew the ripple effects would extend far beyond Oak Creek, influencing departmental policies and individual behavior. Harlan, attentive, asked about the balance between enforcement and oversight. Barrett's response was measured, emphasizing integrity, vigilance, and ethical leadership as the foundation for preventing future abuses. Their route led them to a federal office in suburban Virginia, where Barrett would coordinate with field agents, ensuring a comprehensive audit of the Oak Creek precinct and related operations. The office, stark and functional, provided a controlled environment for strategizing. Barrett convened his team, reviewing the detailed operational timeline, ensuring no evidence or lead had been overlooked. Special Agent Valeria Kane provided updates on asset seizures, financial audits, and procedural violations discovered. Barrett absorbed the information, integrating it into the larger plan for systemic reform. His approach was not punitive for the sake of retribution, but restorative, aiming to protect innocent citizens and hold accountable those who weaponized their authority. As dusk fell, Barrett stood at a window overlooking the city, considering the cultural and societal implications of the Oak Creek scandal. It was a microcosm of challenges faced nationwide: misuse of power, erosion of trust, and the delicate balance between enforcement and justice. He noted the importance of transparency, oversight, and ethical leadership as pillars for restoring faith in institutions. Barrett's commitment was clear. The Lincoln Navigator stop was the catalyst, but the mission extended beyond individual accountability to structural change, ensuring systemic safeguards for the vulnerable. The office grew quiet as the team left for the evening, but Barrett remained, reviewing every report, mentally preparing for the next phase of operations, reaffirming that justice was a process demanding patience, precision, and unwavering integrity. Over the following weeks, Barrett coordinated with federal agents to implement systemic oversight, reviewing policies, procedures, and financial records across Oak Creek and neighboring jurisdictions. Each meeting was meticulous. No detail was too small. Barrett emphasized training, ethical conduct, and procedural integrity as the foundation of reform. Harlan, now firmly established in internal affairs, absorbed Barrett's methods, learning to recognize subtle patterns of abuse and document evidence meticulously. Barrett examined the ripple effects of the Oak Creek case: community trust slowly restored, local officials held accountable, and institutional structures corrected. He instructed field agents to monitor impound lots, scrutinize traffic stop data, and audit financial transactions linked to law enforcement officers and court systems. He prioritized transparency, ensuring the public had access to reports, reinforcing that the law is a protective force, not an instrument of oppression. Barrett's reflection extended to the psychology of those involved in corruption. Understanding motive, opportunity, and overconfidence was crucial for preventing repeat offenses. He integrated behavioral assessments into training programs, highlighting the consequences of arrogance unchecked by accountability. Concurrently, media coverage of Oak Creek faded, but Barrett remained focused, knowing systemic change requires sustained oversight, not public spectacle. In the quiet moments of planning, Barrett revisited the night of his arrest, analyzing every decision and procedural violation, refining strategies for future field tests to detect and prevent corruption. The Lincoln Navigator remained a symbol, a case study demonstrating the vulnerabilities in power structures when oversight fails. Barrett's meticulous approach ensured that every arrest, asset seizure, and legal motion was executed with precision, leaving no room for misinterpretation or procedural missteps. Meetings extended into evenings, reviewing evidence and coordinating with the Civil Rights Division and Department of Justice. Barrett emphasized that ethical enforcement requires courage, attention to detail, and unwavering integrity. Each successful intervention reinforced public trust, demonstrating that federal oversight could both protect citizens and correct institutional failures. Through measured leadership, Barrett transformed personal humiliation into a blueprint for systemic reform, illustrating that accountability, preparation, and ethical rigor can dismantle corruption at its roots. Harlan observed quietly, noting the subtle interplay between authority, responsibility, and moral courage, understanding that justice is as much about process as outcome. Barrett concluded the day reviewing the operational plan for Alabama, identifying potential areas for intervention, ensuring that the lessons learned in Oak Creek could be applied to prevent future abuses nationwide. The night ended not with celebration, but with quiet resolve, the weight of responsibility balanced by the satisfaction of restoring integrity to institutions once compromised. Barrett's attention shifted to Alabama, where reports indicated a pattern mirroring Oak Creek's abuses. The sheriff's office was seizing cash from out-of-state drivers under questionable asset forfeiture practices. Barrett planned a measured intervention, coordinating with federal agents, civil rights officials, and local law enforcement who maintained integrity. Harlan, now well-versed in investigative procedures, assisted in reviewing traffic stop logs, impound records, and financial transactions, identifying anomalies indicative of corruption. Barrett emphasized patience, precision, and evidence-based action, ensuring interventions were airtight and legally unassailable. The Lincoln Navigator case remained a reference, a reminder that even seemingly routine stops could reveal systemic malfeasance when scrutinized. Barrett analyzed behavioral patterns of local officials, recognizing the role of arrogance and unchecked authority in enabling abuse. He crafted field protocols to detect signs of misconduct before harm occurred, integrating both ethical training and practical oversight into enforcement strategies. As teams deployed to Alabama, Barrett conducted briefings, detailing objectives, legal parameters, and the necessity for discretion. Public transparency was maintained without compromising ongoing investigations. Barrett reviewed reports from Oak Creek, cross-referencing previous corruption indicators with new data, ensuring patterns were identified and preventive measures implemented. Each decision balanced legal authority with the moral imperative to protect citizens from exploitation. Harlan observed Barrett's leadership, noting the combination of strategic foresight, ethical clarity, and operational discipline that defined the director's approach. Barrett's methodology prioritized evidence collection, victim protection, and the systematic dismantling of corrupt structures. Overnight, teams began surveillance and audits, while Barrett monitored progress, adjusting tactics in real time to maximize compliance and minimize risk. By dawn, preliminary findings confirmed the replication of the Oak Creek model, officers manipulating traffic enforcement and asset seizures for personal or institutional gain. Barrett's experience allowed him to anticipate potential resistance, legal challenges, and public scrutiny, ensuring interventions would proceed smoothly. Through meticulous coordination and adherence to ethical principles, Barrett turned lessons from personal humiliation and systemic corruption into a replicable framework for nationwide oversight, reinforcing accountability and restoring trust in law enforcement institutions. The mission extended beyond punitive action, emphasizing prevention, reform, and the cultivation of integrity across the counties under scrutiny. Barrett's operation in Alabama progressed with disciplined precision. Federal teams, following his strategy, monitored traffic enforcement practices, identifying officers manipulating impound procedures and exploiting drivers. Barrett emphasized evidence collection and ethical intervention, instructing Harlan and the field agents to document every transaction, interaction, and irregularity meticulously. The pattern mirrored Oak Creek. Arbitrary stops, inflated fines, and coercive asset seizures funneled into private gain. Barrett reviewed previous Oak Creek documentation, cross-referencing vehicle logs, financial transfers, and internal communications to anticipate and detect similar schemes. Every detail informed operational decisions, ensuring the legal and procedural integrity of the intervention. Overnight surveillance revealed discrepancies in sheriff's reports, demonstrating premeditated manipulation of impoundment and court scheduling. Barrett convened his team for strategic review, emphasizing the importance of maintaining discretion and protecting innocent drivers while gathering irrefutable evidence. Harlan, now skilled in operational oversight, contributed insights into behavioral indicators of corruption, helping identify officers susceptible to misconduct. Barrett coordinated communication with local district attorneys, ensuring that evidence collected would withstand prosecutorial scrutiny. The operation was deliberate, avoiding spectacle while maximizing legal accountability. Barrett's own experience, having been humiliated and misjudged in Oak Creek, sharpened his approach. Psychological insight, patience, and strategic deployment were as essential as legal authority. Teams documented officer behavior, audited financial transactions, and reviewed impound records for irregularities, creating a comprehensive evidentiary framework. Barrett analyzed historical data to predict potential resistance, mapping patterns of collusion and administrative manipulation. By midday, preliminary findings confirmed extensive abuse mirroring Oak Creek. validating the federal oversight strategy. Barrett emphasized that reform was both preventive and corrective, integrating education, monitoring, and legal enforcement to restore integrity. The Lincoln Navigator incident remained a reference point, demonstrating how a single vulnerable encounter could reveal systemic corruption. Barrett's attention to operational detail, moral clarity, and strategic patience ensured that interventions would dismantle structural abuse, protect citizens, and restore public trust, setting a national precedent for accountability and ethical enforcement. Barrett's team expanded its review to encompass the broader regional network of law enforcement in Alabama. Each impound lot, court docket, and asset forfeiture record was scrutinized for anomalies. Barrett emphasized methodical documentation, ensuring that every officer action was traceable and legally accountable. Harlan assisted in coordinating interviews with drivers and clerks who had experienced arbitrary seizures or falsified charges. Barrett analyzed these first-hand accounts, comparing them with official records to detect patterns of abuse. Surveillance teams documented officer behavior during traffic stops, noting deviations from standard procedures, unreported fines, and unexplained impound activity. Barrett's focus remained on systemic correction, using evidence to hold accountable those who exploited their authority while protecting law-abiding personnel from undue scrutiny. Cross-referencing Oak Creek precedents, Barrett identified administrative loopholes that allowed abuse to persist, instructing agents on targeted audits of court scheduling and impound fee collection. Each step reinforced the legal integrity of the intervention, ensuring any prosecutions would withstand scrutiny. Overnight, Barrett reviewed the accumulating data, noting correlations between officers' discretionary practices and financial irregularities. Predictive modeling suggested potential collusion, allowing preemptive measures to prevent further misconduct. Harlan observed Barrett's methodical approach, noting the combination of operational oversight, ethical guidance, and strategic foresight. Barrett's experience with Oak Creek informed a tactical balance, evidence collection without public exposure until judicial review, maintaining credibility and procedural authority. By morning, teams had documented several incidents of misconduct, each reinforcing the case for federal oversight. Barrett convened a briefing, instructing field agents to continue meticulous evidence logging and to prepare for court proceedings, ensuring that all corrupt actors would be held accountable, while the integrity of innocent officers remained intact. The mission's objective extended beyond prosecution, restoring public trust and establishing a replicable model for systemic reform in law enforcement, ensuring ethical enforcement became standard practice across the region. By the second week of the Alabama operation, Barrett had established a comprehensive oversight protocol. Teams monitored traffic enforcement in real time, recording every stop, citation, and impound action. Harlan coordinated the data stream, ensuring that anomalies in officer behavior were flagged and cross-referenced with historical records. Barrett emphasized meticulous documentation to build airtight cases against any officer exploiting authority. The Lincoln Navigator incident served as a case study, demonstrating how routine encounters can expose systemic corruption when observed with strategic precision. Barrett reviewed patterns of asset seizure, noting inflated fines and unrecorded impounds, and compared them to Oak Creek precedents. Each irregularity indicated deliberate manipulation of authority for financial gain. Interviews with local clerks and drivers corroborated surveillance findings, highlighting the human impact of procedural abuse. Barrett convened daily briefings, outlining tactical adjustments and reinforcing ethical conduct with field agents. Every action was legally vetted, balancing enforcement with public accountability. By the end of the week, preliminary reports indicated several officers involved in repeated misconduct, creating a foundation for indictments and systemic reform. Barrett's strategy emphasized preventative measures, continuous oversight, and the careful preparation of evidence for judicial review. Harlan noted the sophistication of the operation. Coordinated observation, behavioral analysis, and procedural documentation. Barrett reflected on the broader implications. Ethical enforcement and accountability could be institutionalized, setting a national precedent. The mission extended beyond punitive measures, aiming to restore public confidence, dismantle corrupt systems, and create replicable frameworks for monitoring and reform. Barrett knew that integrity and patience, applied methodically, could transform law enforcement culture and protect vulnerable citizens from exploitation. The day ended with a sense of measured progress. The systemic abuses were being addressed, and federal oversight was reshaping institutional accountability in a manner that would endure beyond Oak Creek and Alabama. As federal teams continued oversight in Alabama, Barrett focused on reinforcing ethical leadership and sustainable reform. He convened a meeting with Harlan and field agents to review collected evidence, ensuring procedural accuracy and integrity. Every citation, impound report, and financial transaction was cross-verified against historical patterns and behavioral profiles. Barrett emphasized the importance of documenting each officer's actions meticulously, preparing for judicial scrutiny while protecting law-abiding personnel from false accusations. Interviews with affected drivers revealed recurring exploitation and psychological intimidation, reinforcing the need for comprehensive systemic reform. Barrett analyzed these accounts alongside surveillance footage, identifying trends of misconduct and patterns of abuse. Harlan took careful notes, learning to interpret subtle signs of corruption and collusion among local law enforcement. Barrett reflected on Oak Creek, understanding how arrogance and unchecked authority enabled abuse, and adapted strategies to anticipate similar challenges. Teams implemented preventive monitoring, alert systems, and educational briefings for law enforcement officers committed to ethical practices. Barrett coordinated with district attorneys and civil rights officials, ensuring evidence admissibility and procedural transparency. By midday, reports indicated significant compliance gaps, confirming the necessity of federal intervention. Barrett briefed Harlan on tactical adjustments and legal protocols, underscoring the dual objectives: prosecuting corrupt actors and restoring public trust. Each step was deliberate: meticulous documentation, strategic oversight, and clear ethical guidance. Barrett emphasized patience, precision, and accountability, understanding that sustainable reform required both enforcement and cultural change within the law enforcement institutions. The operation extended beyond immediate prosecution, aiming to create a replicable framework for systemic monitoring, prevention, and public accountability. Barrett's leadership demonstrated how strategic foresight, operational discipline, and ethical rigor could dismantle entrenched corruption and protect citizens, ensuring that law enforcement serves as a shield, not a weapon. Barrett turned his focus to long-term oversight, establishing continuous auditing protocols across Alabama and adjacent counties. Teams implemented monitoring systems to track traffic stops, impounds, and financial transactions in real time, flagging any irregularities indicative of abuse. Harlan coordinated data integration, cross-referencing officer behavior with historical Oak Creek patterns to identify potential misconduct. Barrett emphasized procedural integrity, ensuring every action could withstand judicial review. Interviews with drivers and clerks provided human context, highlighting the consequences of arbitrary fines and coerced impounds. Barrett used these accounts to refine operational strategies, balancing accountability with protection of ethical officers. Field agents conducted discreet surveillance, documenting officer interactions, while Barrett reviewed reports, identifying collusion and irregular financial flows. Preventive measures were introduced: educational briefings for officers, ethical training, and clear reporting protocols to empower law-abiding personnel. Barrett reflected on his experience in Oak Creek, understanding how arrogance and overconfidence create vulnerabilities. He used this insight to anticipate resistance and prevent further misconduct. Daily briefings reviewed evidence, operational adjustments, and strategic next steps, ensuring cohesion and effectiveness. Barrett reinforced that the goal extended beyond prosecutions, restoring public trust and institutional integrity, demonstrating that law enforcement must serve citizens ethically. Harlan observed and absorbed lessons in ethical leadership, behavioral analysis, and meticulous operational oversight. Barrett's approach combined tactical precision with moral clarity, creating a replicable framework for systemic reform. By evening, preliminary findings confirmed ongoing abuse, validating intervention strategies and reinforcing the importance of sustained federal oversight. The mission aimed not just to punish corrupt actors, but to embed accountability, transparency, and ethical standards into law enforcement culture, ensuring that future abuses could be prevented and trust restored. Barrett's oversight extended into systemic reform, implementing continuous auditing protocols across Alabama and surrounding counties. Each traffic stop, impound, and financial transaction was meticulously recorded, creating a comprehensive evidentiary framework. Harlan coordinated data management, cross-referencing officer behavior with historical Oak Creek patterns to detect misconduct. Barrett emphasized procedural integrity, ensuring every intervention could withstand judicial scrutiny. Victim interviews reinforced the human impact of systemic abuse, highlighting coercive fines, arbitrary impounds, and intimidation tactics. Barrett integrated these accounts with surveillance footage, identifying collusion and procedural manipulation. Ethical training sessions were deployed for compliant officers, balancing accountability with empowerment. Barrett used his experience from Oak Creek to anticipate resistance, adjusting strategies to preempt obstruction. Daily briefings reviewed evidence, operational adjustments, and legal procedures, ensuring cohesion among federal teams. Barrett reinforced that the ultimate objective extended beyond punitive action to restoring public trust, embedding transparency, and cultivating ethical culture in law enforcement. Harlan learned to identify behavioral indicators of corruption and interpret operational data with precision. Barrett's approach combined tactical oversight, moral clarity, and strategic patience, creating a replicable model for institutional reform. Preliminary audits confirmed patterns of misconduct, validating intervention strategies and reinforcing the need for sustained oversight. Barrett's leadership demonstrated that methodical planning, ethical vigilance, and precise execution could dismantle entrenched corruption while protecting law-abiding personnel, establishing a standard for systemic accountability and public trust. With Alabama operations stabilized, Barrett turned attention to consolidating evidence and finalizing reports for judicial proceedings. Field agents continued monitoring traffic stops, impound procedures, and officer behavior, ensuring accurate documentation of misconduct. Harlan coordinated collection of witness statements, surveillance logs, and financial records, providing context to the data. Barrett emphasized ethical enforcement and systemic reform, reinforcing training and accountability for compliant officers. The investigation identified further collusion, exposing networks exploiting drivers through falsified fines and arbitrary impounds. Barrett integrated Oak Creek precedents to anticipate legal challenges and procedural resistance, ensuring robust case construction. By midweek, the compiled evidence allowed for federal indictments and corrective oversight measures to be initiated. Barrett convened his team for strategic planning, detailing prosecutorial coordination and preventive reforms. Daily reviews refined operational strategies, addressing gaps in enforcement and ensuring procedural compliance. Barrett reflected on lessons from Oak Creek and Alabama. Systemic corruption thrives on unchecked authority, but careful observation, ethical vigilance, and strategic patience dismantle entrenched abuse. Harlan absorbed leadership insights, learning to navigate complex legal and ethical landscapes while ensuring accountability. Barrett's methods created a replicable framework, demonstrating that federal oversight, combined with ethical training and meticulous documentation, restores institutional integrity and public trust. By evening, preliminary findings indicated successful disruption of corrupt practices, setting the stage for formal prosecutions and long-term reforms. The mission extended beyond punishment, emphasizing prevention, transparency, and cultural change within law enforcement, leaving a durable legacy of integrity, accountability, and citizen protection. The final stage of Barrett's mission brought him to Richmond for the culmination of the Oak Creek and Alabama investigations. The federal courthouse was filled to capacity, victims and journalists alike awaiting resolution. Barrett sat quietly in the gallery, observing the proceedings without fanfare, knowing his role as orchestrator had already ensured justice. Caldwell and Ronan, once arrogant and untouchable, faced sentencing for racketeering, civil rights violations, and systematic abuse. The judge's voice resonated through the courtroom as sentences were read. Caldwell received 30 years without parole, Ronan 25. The gavel's impact symbolized the closure of systemic corruption and restored faith for those affected. Barrett observed the victim's reactions, noting relief, vindication, and empowerment. He reflected on the journey from personal humiliation in Oak Creek to a nationwide demonstration of accountability. Outside the courthouse, Barrett addressed the press briefly, emphasizing the broader lesson: power must be balanced by accountability, and ethical enforcement safeguards the innocent. Months of meticulous planning, oversight, and evidence gathering had resulted in systemic reform, demonstrating the efficacy of patience, precision, and moral clarity. Barrett turned to Harlan, who had grown into a capable internal affairs officer, reinforcing the importance of ethical leadership and vigilance. The director stepped into a government sedan, ready to move forward to new investigations, already identifying patterns of misconduct in other jurisdictions. Barrett glanced at the horizon, a subtle smile crossing his face. Each small victory reinforced the principle that corruption, no matter how entrenched, could be dismantled through meticulous strategy, ethical determination, and unwavering courage. As the sedan merged into traffic, Barrett reflected on the responsibility of power and the necessity of justice in maintaining societal trust. The mission was complete, yet the vigilance would continue, a lasting commitment to the integrity of law enforcement. The sun rose fully, casting light on a system restored, a community vindicated, and a standard set for ethical enforcement nationwide. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.